I have to make a little correction, though. I only had 40 sacks in college. 58 would have been, I would have been a first rounder, not a fourth rounder. That would have been, I appreciate it. It made me look good. So my iPad died, and that's what I had most of my notes on. But luckily with technology, it goes to my phone, too. The only problem I'm having is Coach Frazier won't stop texting me. And so he knows where I'm at. So I wonder what's the curveball you're trying to throw me here, Coach. Anyways, I just want to thank you guys for having me. Got some good teammates here in the audience. And I tell you what, I thought I came to inspire you guys a little bit. But with those three young people talking, I tell you what, that was a little inspiration for myself. First of all, someone needs to card Drake because I think he's about 27 years old. Not really sure that kid's in high school, but way to go. And Hannah, you did great. She told me earlier that she was going to be a little nervous and she was worried about it, but I thought she did great. So I thought I'd just start by sharing my little kind of my journey a little bit. I'd never had this flash of light experience with God. It'd been easier if I did. I tell you what, I would have been a high school believer. I was a believer in high school. I grew up in the church. Every Sunday in church with my folks. Half the time sleeping on my dad's lap when I was little. The other half coming from a high school party, and my mom making me get up, and I was miserable. So to see this kind of dedication in the youth is awesome. You guys truly are inspirations, man. Keep that. That is something that I did not have at our high school, and my best friend's dad was a pastor, and we were always late to his church. So, that is seriously inspirational. But anyways, I always grew up knowing the Lord. I always knew that it was better to believe in God than it wasn't to believe in God. It just made sense. Big Bang Theory, who are you kidding, right? That just doesn't happen. Why aren't there dinosaurs still? Why aren't things still evolving? So it just made sense to believe in God. And but I kind of had what I like to call the old heart rate monitor, It had peaks were high and lows were low, and I'd be in the shower like Saturday night, like, oh, Lord, next time, I promise I won't do it next time, And constantly had this, what I like to call, I was taking from Christ all the time. I was taking from him. God, please forgive me again. And then I would create problems like, I believe in the Bible, just not all the Bible. There's a couple things there I don't really believe in. I have questions about. Obviously, I was making excuses for the bad things I was doing, So for me, it was just kind of this path of God was there when I needed him, when life was good, I was chilling, life was good. And I got in a little trouble in Kansas City, made a couple bad decisions, and it forced me to do some growing up. It really did. And so I kind of, sometimes you hit a low in your life and you go back to what your foundation is. And, fortunately for me, I had great parents that were great God-fearing parents, and, they had instilled Christ into me at a young age. And so I knew Christ. And so I started reading my Bible again, starting to get back into it, started having a relationship with my pastor, who was my best friend's dad. So I probably should have had one with him the whole time, right? So I started kind of giving a little bit to God. And so I was like, all right, this is pretty cool. Got through my little troubles, and God blessed me. And I truly think God uses events in your life to set you up for greater things. Kansas City was a great place, but we had a locker room that we were close, man. We always went out. Thursday night, I knew where we were going to dinner. Friday night, and we had good God-fearing people, and I've always had relationships with my chaplains and stuff like that. And so, but I think God used an adverse time in my life to prepare me, because when I got to Minnesota, my life changed. Granted, blessed with a great contract, a great city, but I met some true God-fearing people, and I was able to become a part of a chapel service and a Bible study up here with direction, with true believers, with guys that were really out for Christ and really making a difference in their life. So Jeff Seaman, I was at chapel. This was back in '08, and Jeff Seaman gave a talk, and I'm reading my Bible. I'm going to Bible study here, but I was really reading my Bible to prepare me for Bible study. And he gave a talk. He said, if you were arrested today, so I'm gonna. This is a question I'm asking you guys. This is what Jeff Seaman asked us in chapel. If you were arrested today for being a Christian, is there enough to convict you? Is there enough evidence to convict you? And we're sitting there. I'm like, that's kind of heavy before a game, Jeff. Appreciate you throwing that at us. But I went back in my room that night and I thought, you know what? There's not. I got to be honest. I know where my heart's at, but I cuss like a sailor, you know. I mean, a sailor probably would have thought I cussed too much. And I know Drake said Christians aren't supposed to hurt people on the field, but I genuinely liked hurting people on the football field. Still do. I pray about that a lot. But I was like, you know what? My actions aren't matching up what my heart is. I'm not standing on the foundation that I know I have. And so for me, I started realizing, you know why I don't, the reason I'm not standing up and like professing that I'm a Christian more often, because I was so concerned with like what the world's view of a Christian is. You know, I'm like, well, if I say I love the Lord like out loud and someone sees me having a beer at dinner, they're going to judge me. Well, if I do this, well, then I'm going to have to live this perfect. Well, guess what? We're not perfect. We're not, and it's not going to happen. I'm not standing up here saying I am perfect. And so once I got that silly notion out that I was living for the world, like, you know, what the world thought a Christian was, and I actually opened my Bible and I started giving to Christ, it's amazing when you give to Christ what Christ will give back to you. I learned so much just by opening my Bible, and I realized, there were so many opportunities for me to be used, but how can you be used? How can God call on you if you're not in his word? If you're not available, if you're not listening, I can't hear a play if I got headphones on, you know what I mean? It's just not going to happen. And so I started reading my Bible. I just made some little changes. I said, you know what, I'm going to stop cussing. I'm not going to, and, you know, I'm not a believer that, you know, someone needs to stand on the sidewalk and hit you with holy water, because I think that turns people away. So I'm like, you know what, I'm not even going to say anything about it. I'm just going to stop cussing. And which, again, in my world is tough to do, especially when you're choking a dude on the top of the quarterback. But so I was like, you know, I'm just gonna stop cussing. That's what I'm gonna do. So I quit cussing, and then I decided, and you know what? People started noticing. Like, oh wow, you know, Jared, notice you haven't been cussing that much anymore. Oh, I appreciate it. Then I thought, you know, and it's amazing how big of an idiot you sound like when you're the guy cussing, and then you're around other people that cuss. You're just like, oh my goodness, it sounded like a toddler, you know, if toddlers cuss, but you get what I'm saying. So I'm sitting there, and then I decided, you know what, man, I'm gonna have some discipline in my life. You know, I sacrifice a lot for football. You know, I eat right. The older I get, it's so hard to eat right though, because my wife makes delicious lasagna. Don't marry an Italian, and if you did, you're good. God bless you. They cook so well, and so I'm like, man, I make so many sacrifices in my life. I work hard. You know, I work out hard. I mean, I'm in the gym 6 hours a day. You know, I try to diet properly. You know, you got meetings. You're doing all this stuff. I'm like, I do this to be better at football. So how come I haven't sacrificed anything in my life to be a better Christian? So I decided, you know what I'm going to do? Nothing crazy, you know. I'm going to wake up every morning, and I'm going to try to read a chapter in my Bible. So that wasn't so hard. Try to do that. And next thing you know, I mean, the Bible like came alive to me. It was the coolest thing. Like, I was actually talking with Jake in the back. I'm reading 2 Samuel right now. Like, they're the characters in the Bible, and I call them characters, but they're the people, obviously, the real live people, you know what I mean? Like, so I'm reading about David right now. A chosen guy from God, anointed by God. This dude was messed up, like in some areas. So I'm like, I'm doing all right, you know what I mean? So like, totally David here, thousands of years before me, he's totally encouraging me, right? Because I'm like, well, I didn't do that, and God still loved him. That is great. I can do this. You know what? I can be great for God and still be great in what I do. And I think that as athletes, sometimes we think we have to live how we play. You know, I used to think because I played crazy and reckless on the field that I had to live borderline reckless, like that was my edge, you know what I mean? Because again, I was letting outside influences control my belief, or control how I acted, not my beliefs, because I believed what I believed, but I believed those in private, you know? And so once I got into the Bible, man, I tell you what, it was really cool. It really opened my eyes, and, you know, I'm reading about Paul, and again, I've heard, you know, Coach was talking about Paul. That dude was a bad dude, and I'm thinking, again, this dude's probably the most down dude for Jesus ever, and he used to kill Christians. I'm like, I didn't do that. Cool, I'm one more up, you know what I'm saying? So I just found so much encouragement, and then I found that there was opportunities in my life that God would use me. And again, I'm not a preacher. I don't have a desire to be a preacher. But what I want to do, I want to be available that when God uses me, or there's an opportunity, I want to be available to say, yes, this is what's going on in my life because of Christ. And I used to get, you know, so concerned that, well, if I say I'm a Christian, I thought, in every conversation you would have to bring up God. We've all been there. You talk to your pastor, and all of a sudden you say God bless you about 10 more times than you've ever said to anybody in your life. God bless you, pastor. Hey, pastor, God bless you. You're like, yeah. But who are we trying to kid? Are we trying to make our pastors think that we're believers? We should be, when I die, I want God to say, well done, you good and faithful servant. However you use me, whether it's talking at an FCA, whether it's just living a life. And the best compliment I ever got, Joe Webb is here, and he probably doesn't even know he did this. This year, and you can ask my teammates, I don't throw God in your face. I just believe what I believe, and I go about my business. And Joe Webb, he's been coming to Bible study at my house, and he came up to me this year, and he was like, hey, Jay, we were talking about this thing in Bible study, man. How do you, can you explain this to me? What? You're asking, hold up. 4 years ago. So the transformation that God made in my life by making 2 simple corrections. I think we overcomplicate things so much where we think to be a Christian, you have to be so devout. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be disciplined and that you shouldn't try, when the right and wrong decision comes up, you should make the right decision. That's our goal. But we're going to fall. And when we realize that that's okay, we can get out of our own way. And that was my biggest problem. I was so afraid to fall because of what everybody else would think that I couldn't rise, And so I'm sitting here, and you're like, man, I didn't really, it's not like I didn't do anything crazy, you know what I mean? And so a person noticed, a fellow Christian, a guy who was in the Word, and he had a question about something, came to me because he thought that I had an understanding that I could explain it to him. That was the coolest thing for me. We had a gentleman named Styles G. He didn't make the team, unfortunately, because that name is killer. He's a big fan of Teen Wolf, and if anybody else is a big fan of Teen Wolf, I don't suggest you change your name because that's just a bad life decision. But Styles G, he's a D lineman, and actually his name is, that's what I'm going to call him. And we were in our D line meeting room, and he came up to me and he said, hey Jay, hey, let's go out to dinner, let's hit the strip club. I said, hey man, that's not what I do. I don't treat my wife like that, and that's not how I believe, I said, but I'll go out to dinner with you, and what you do after that? Have at it, Hoss. And went about our separate ways. About 2 months later, I'm talking to Les Pico, our player development, head of our player development of the Vikings. And he's walking by. I'm on the treadmill, and I don't run. I walk on the treadmill. I'm like a 90-year-old man, hiking up the hill. I'm like, that's the secret, guys. You think I'm doing all this crazy stuff? I'm just walking uphill. Give me some shape-ups, and it's on. And so I'm doing my march. I'm like, whew, whew. Donovan's next to me with his shirt tucked in. I'm like, what's up, dude? And so Les Pico comes up. He walks by him, and he comes back. He says, you know what, Jared? I've been meaning to tell you this. When we cut this dude 2 months ago. He goes, when we cut him, he came all the way down because Pico's office used to be upstairs. So he had to walk all the way down, back to the locker room, down to the weight room. And he came and he saw Les, and he said, Peak, I'm really disappointed I didn't make this team because for the first time in my life, I thought about living differently. And he was like, really? What's up, Greg? He said, I asked Jared to go to the strip club with me. And he didn't judge me or he didn't scoff at me. He said, I've asked other Christians. I used to needle some guys that I knew believed in God, on the other team, joking with them and see what they do. And they'd kind of scoff at me. He just said that's not what he believes in. He doesn't treat his wife that way, but he would go to dinner with me. I had no clue that was something, hey. But something that I had no control over, I just made a simple comment that had nothing to do with God. I just said, hey, I don't believe in that. I don't treat my wife that way. Had a profound impact on his life. So that's the cool thing is you never know what words you say. You never know what kind gesture you might do. And that's why I'm a firm believer. It's the simplest things that we do that probably portray the greatest amount of love. And the one overwhelming theme I get when I read the Bible, and I believe in the Bible it's 8 times just in the New Testament alone, God says it pretty simple. Love God with all your heart, soul, and strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. Love each other. So I made one loving comment. I just didn't make fun of the guy for it or scoff at him. And here's a guy that all of a sudden wanted to change his life. So that impacted me. I was like, man, you never know when God's going to use you just by living your everyday life. And so, for me, that was crazy. That just gave me such encouragement. And, that carried over into the offseason because, in our profession, it's easy when we got chapel on Saturday nights before the game. You're already at the hotel. You got nothing better to do, I think half the people were like, get me a little Jesus luck. Rub the cross a little bit, And, but, again, it doesn't matter why they're there. They get to hear God. They get to hear the word for like 30 minutes. And this year was so miserable. Honest to goodness, this year was sucked. 3-13 was terrible. But I probably had the most fun playing football I've ever had. And 22 sacks is great, but it wasn't because we had record number since I've been here at Bible study. You guys see, my house was hot. It was packed full of people. Like, Jerry, can we go downstairs? Nope. So, we had like 20 people coming to Bible studies. Our chapel services were full. And again, I think through adversity, heck, the Bible says through adversity, God, prepares you for greater things. And so, for me, I've just seen so many little cool, simple things along the way that have given me such motivation. Just sitting in that chair tonight and listening to young kids spoke gave me, like, encouragement. It really did. That was the coolest thing ever. I didn't expect to have that tonight. But then when Jake asked me to speak, I was reminded of my old FCA kind of days. I got to be honest. I was going to open up with this, but I figured I'd let you guys know who I was first because otherwise you might be a little taken aback and you guys might throw tomatoes at me. But so my FCA, I left FCA. FCA at my college was a joke. And I didn't even know they did in high school. And I think this is the coolest thing ever. And so my FCA was, we all went, we met with our chaplain, but we would get there and people would be like, oh, I'm great. I can't quote it exactly, but in Hebrews it talks about, being solid food or baby's milk, or where you're at in your spiritual maturity, right? So our chaplain was talking about it one day. Pastor Paul, love Pastor Paul. He asked, and everybody's like, oh, I'm a steak. I'm solid food. And I was like, you liars. I lost it in FCA. I just lost it. I'm like, I've been coming here for 2 months, and we don't ever do crap but tell each other how good we're doing, and you're lying. You were drunk in my house last night. I know who you slept with. And, I just went off, and I just started throwing people under the bus, and I was like, this is stupid. Peace. I'm out of here, right? And I was just so upset, right? Because I'm like, how on earth? And so my FCA leader, Pastor Paul grabbed me. He's like, Jerry, I don't really think that was the best approach. But why don't you and I meet for breakfast every day and we can get through this? And I was like, okay, but now looking back, so after going through this journey I've gone through, and let me tell you, I'm nowhere near complete. Like, I have leaps and bounds where if I'm here now, I can imagine what God's going to do with me in 10 years, So by no means am I saying up here I got it all together or am on the right path. I'm on the right path, but not saying that I'm nowhere near finished. But the cool thing about it, through reflection, and when Jake asked me to come up here, I remember back on that, and I'm like, man, if I would have known the things there was an opportunity there, if I had been reading my Bible, if I had been standing on the foundation that my parents, had raised me to be, there was an opportunity there not to just blow it off, but to really help some people out, and I think FCA is the coolest. Like, listening to you guys talk, that is what FCA is about. To encourage people. There's so many challenges. You guys are going to go to college, and you're going to be faced with temptations and challenges, and I pray that you always make the right decision, but you might not. And the coolest thing I learned through this journey is I had a pastor out in Arizona to say one time, we repent as Christians. We repent not to be forgiven, but because we are forgiven. And when I stopped and thought about that, I was like, man, that is so cool. And again, it just goes back to, I don't have to be afraid to fail. I don't have to live my life as if I do something wrong, like, God's going to hit me in the face with a brick or something, So just to hear that message and then to hear you guys talk is cool because challenges are going to come up. And you know what? There's going to be someone out there thinking the exact same thing you have. Like that question, like, well, why can't I go out and do this? Or what about this? People are going to have these questions and they're going to be afraid to ask. But through FCA and through leaders like Drake and you guys are going to provide an outlet for these people. I wish I would have had someone there encouraging me like that in college. Maybe this journey would have started a lot sooner. Maybe I would have figured it out, a lot sooner. And it comes down to, Proverbs 27:17. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. And I think that's what FCA is about, especially as athletes. We get it. Like, athletes, we're a different breed. We truly are. If you're not an athlete, then you really don't know what I'm talking about. But there's a competitiveness. We live our lives just slightly different. I am slightly off whack. I don't think normal. Like, sometimes, like, I'm not going to lie. Like, watching a dude get up slowly off the ground excites me. Like, I'm not gonna ask for forgiveness for that, because the Old Testament's way worse. They were slaying people, but we live our, so to have the thing like FCA, where you have leaders like these young kids. I'm telling you that you guys are gonna do great things in college. To come to and understand, and that's the biggest thing, is be understanding. Let's get real with each other. Let's not sugarcoat it. Sometimes it sounds up here to say, or it's nice to stand up here and say great things. God's great, God's this, God, that is awesome. He is. But sometimes as Christians, we go through some low points. And sometimes you're going to question, what does God really have in store for me? And that's when you really need groups like FCA. There's a young gentleman here who's his knee is he's rehabbing a completely shot knee. There's my man. He doesn't know if he's going to play football again. And he might be thinking, why on earth, why me? Why me? We've all thought, why me, God? Heck, I'd do it. I'm like, really? Why? I was sitting next to some crazy dude on the plane today, and I'm like, really, God, why? And this is a true story. And I was like, I'm going to have to choke this dude out on the plane. I told my wife, I am a plane Nazi, by the way, just so you guys know. Like, if you're on my flight, I'm like the air marshal. Don't act crazy, because it is on. And I was on my honeymoon, and I tried to fight a guy because he was banging on the cockpit door. My wife's like, stop it. I'm like, he won't sit down. And but he might be having these questions. And if he doesn't have someone to go there, or if he has a group that isn't honest with him, if he has a group that's like, oh yeah, life's great, everything's okay, we're doing peachy. What are we accomplishing? Because our goal in life isn't to make other people think that I've got it all together. I was telling Jake back there, I think the one major thing I learned through, I think, being a true Christian is I really don't care what you think. And that sounds bad. I care what Jesus thinks. You can judge me all you want. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. So these groups, and I keep going back to what I did in college, and I wish I would have had someone there, because I had these questions, I had these thoughts, like, why this, why can't this, I didn't have an outlet to reach to. And, now look at it, the FCA at our college is great, but I'm challenging you guys. In your groups, talk about everything. You might be, but don't feel like you have to always be up. If you have a question, throw it out there. Someone else has that question. If you're struggling with something, throw it out there. Someone else is struggling with it, but guess what? Someone else probably has the answer. Sometimes I think as Christians too, we put too much in God's hands. Like, listen, I've been praying and nothing happened. Well, God's also saying, get off your butt and make something happen. I can sit there and wish I would break the sack record every day of my life, but if I eat ho-hos and I don't go to the gym, and I'm going to be on the offensive line, I'm not even going to have a chance, So, and Khalil's not here. I'll take him. What's up? But that's really, that's really kind of what I wanted to push on you guys, is that, and again, having this, being up here and being invited to talk really made me think about my college FCA days. And I just thought, you know what? I bet there's going to be people going to college that are going to have some of these problems. I bet there's going to be people out there that just don't want to just, say it. But you're not hurting yourself. You're hurting others too. I mean, like I said, we all have problems. But, God might use somebody else to help fix your problem. And I'll wrap up with this. Through my, playing days and stuff, I get to hear really cool speakers speak. Mark Batterson, he wrote a book called In a Pit with a Lion on a Snowy Day. Probably one of the most instrumental books I've ever read, minus the Bible. And he talks that, I don't know, you guys are young, so you guys grew up in this totally different era. You know, I got spanked when I was little, so you guys got video games and stick horses. But, you know, I grew up in a very legalistic type thinking. You know, a lot of people did, where being a Christian was a list of do's and don'ts. Well, I can't do this. This isn't very fun. You know, and honestly, it kind of, I got turned off by it. You know, so we're sitting in Washington, and Mark Batterson comes in, and he starts talking about having an I can attitude. So many people say, I can't do this because I'm a Christian. Well, I can't really do this because I'm a Christian. Well, I'm a Christian, so I don't really do that. You know, that sucks. Like, who wants to buy that dream, you know? So he starts talking about I can. I tell you what, I was fired up during chapel. And he was like, no, I can do this because I'm a Christian. I can travel the world because I'm a Christian. I can enjoy, you know, things because I'm a Christian. I can do, and he started talking about, in the book, it talks about breaking the way we think and recharging our minds and getting out of that legalistic type theory that God is alive and God is great and he's actively working in our lives versus, you know, here's these, you know, cans of do's and can don'ts, or shouldn't do's and shouldn't don'ts. I don't even know if that made sense right there, but but yeah, so his book was about, you know, about Benaiah, and I believe he's mentioned in 2 Samuel as well. But anyways, this dude tracks this lion into a pit on a snowy day, right? Ends up knife murdering this lion with a spear, just getting medieval. And nobody around, but through that experience, he ended up being one of the greatest commanders in the army for Israel and with King David and stuff like that. And so, and I had never even heard of Benaiah until I read Mark's book. But it really, again, changed my outlook. And again, it was nothing major. I just started using I can instead of I can't. So in my life, my transformation's been simple. I quit cussing. I read my Bible. And I just started saying I can. And God's done miraculous things in my life. I'm blessed beyond belief. And you guys are probably sitting up here, well, of course you're blessed. You're fine financially, and you can play in the NFL. But I'll tell you, the greatest gift God's ever given me is that eternal peace. You know what? I don't have to worry about where I walk. I don't have to worry about where I take my wife, because I don't have a girlfriend on the side. I'm not living that life. You know what I mean? That is the greatest peace. And in our locker room, I mean, I'm talking about the NFL as a whole. You see that kind of behavior. And to have that peace where I can walk and hold my head up high, and I can win, lose, or draw, at the end of the day, I can say I gave it my all, and I was open for God's will. And there's a couple passages that never really meant anything to me until I looked at them slightly different in this kind of I can, mentality. And now everybody knows Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That was just a really cool, verse, easy to remember that, back in the day, people were like, what's your favorite verse? Oh, Philippians 4:13. You know that one? Yeah, cool. But now it holds me. It really does. I mean, before games, I'd sit there and be like, it's on. And this is kind of my weird way of thinking, so my brain's a little off. I sit there and I'm like, yep, that dude has no chance. Before that Chicago Bears game last year, I told my wife, things are going to get Western on this field today. Promise you. I said, things are getting weird. And I just knew it. I don't know why, but I told my buddy, I said, I'm either going to get kicked out of this game for fighting somebody because I'm so jacked up, or I'm going to break this sack record. And I just knew it. And and I just kept repeating that Philippians 4:13 in my mind. I'm like, you know what? I can do all. It doesn't matter that I need 4 sacks to get it. It doesn't matter. And that brings me to my next verse, 2 Kings 6:16 through 17. And that's the story of Elijah, and his servant runs out, right? And the whole village or city is surrounded by chariots and horses. And the servant comes running back in, freaking out, like, we're going to die. That's what I'm imagining him saying, just totally freaking out. And Elijah looks at him and just says, don't be afraid, the prophet answered. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And then Elijah prayed, open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see. Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked, and he saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elijah. We are never outnumbered, ever. And for me, those are the two coolest things. I can do all things through Christ. Anything, nothing that I can't do. Now, he might not want me to do it, but that's his will. But there's nothing that I can't do, and I'm never outnumbered. So I never have to be afraid. And those two quotes honestly give me the most peace at night. They give me the freedom to go out and play a game that I love, that I've truly been blessed by God to play. It gives me and this is even bigger than me because football's going to go. And I won't, and, God rest Junior Seahaw's soul, but, I know I'm not going to have those problems because I'm more than just football. I'm a man of God. I'm a husband. I'm a father. And as much as God's done great things in my professional life, if you asked me 5 years ago, I'd be standing here happily married with a newborn 6-month-old baby and think this is the coolest life on earth, I wouldn't have said that. But he gives me that peace. He gives me that strength to love my wife the way God intended us to love our wives, to love my daughter the way God intended us. And for you guys that have kids, I just experienced this. I tell people all the time, if you don't believe in God, have a baby. And I'm not advocating having babies if you're not married, but, I'm saying there's no way. I truly understand Jesus' love for me now. When my daughter came into this world, I looked at her and I was like, I don't even know you, but I love the heck out of you. Like, dudes are getting messed up later in life because of you. So I just want to encourage you guys in your FCA groups, man, keep it real with people. Be honest. Be honest where you're at. We're all at different places in our walk, but that's why it's so instrumental to have other people around you that are at different places, because I can learn something from Jake. I just learned something from Drake, Hannah, great talk, and just it doesn't always have to be a catastrophic event. You can change small things in your life, and that'll snowball, and before you know it, you're just like, something's different. And then you look back, and you see it from making one small change. So thank you, guys.